You're listening to Unpacked, The Truth About Hoarding, a podcast that goes beyond the mess to explore the heart, humanity, and healing behind hoarding disorder. Hosted by Matt Williams.
All right, welcome back to Unpacked, The Truth About Hoarding, and I'm your host, the commonly named Matt Williams, coming to you live from high above the Rockwellian main street of Irwin, Pennsylvania. And today, I'd like to ask you a question. Can someone be too kind, too generous, too compassionate? Most of us would probably say no. After all, our world could certainly use more kindness. But over the past several years, working alongside people affected by hoarding disorder, I've discovered something fascinating. Sometimes our greatest strengths become our greatest struggles. So today, I'd like to introduce you to a phrase that changed the way I look at hoarding disorder: pathological altruism. So don't let the name scare you. Pathological altruism isn't a mental illness. It isn't a diagnosis. It's simply an idea that asks this question: what happens when our desire to help others becomes so strong that we begin hurting ourselves? Think about someone who never says no. Is it you? Someone who gives away every free evening, who volunteers for everything, who worries about everyone else's happiness before their own. At first, those qualities sound admirable, but eventually they become exhausting. Without boundaries, kindness becomes self-neglect. I think something very similar happens in many cases of hoarding disorder. I've lost count of how many times I've heard someone say, "I can't throw this away." And it's not because they need it, but because someone could use it, or this is still perfectly good, or it would be wasteful, or what if somebody needs this someday? These words are spoken from a beautiful place. They're spoken by people who care deeply. In fact, I would argue that many of the people I've worked with care more than the average person. And that's exactly the problem. I've met people who kept hundreds of coffee mugs, not because they drank coffee, but because guests might visit someday. I've met people who kept clothing for children, even though there were no children in the home. Because what if a family needs them? I've met people whose garages were filled with building materials, since somebody might be able to fix their porch with this stuff. I've met people who couldn't walk through their own homes while simultaneously worrying that they might throw away something another person could use. Think about that. They were sacrificing their own safety for people who weren't even there, or that they didn't even know yet. The irony could be heartbreaking that people who are trying the hardest to help others often become the ones who need the help themselves the most. This is why I believe boundaries are one of the greatest acts of compassion. Not selfishness, compassion. Because healthy generosity begins by recognizing something many of us were never taught. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If your home has become unsafe, if your relationships are suffering, if you're overwhelmed every day, keeping another box just in case someone might need it isn't helping anyone, including you. One of the things we discuss in our support groups is this: when does generosity stop being generosity? It's a difficult question because nobody wants to think of themselves as selfish. But there's a difference between generosity and responsibility. You are not responsible for solving every future problem. You are not responsible for making sure every object finds its perfect owner. You are not responsible for saving everything that could possibly be useful someday. Those are impossible standards. And impossible standards create impossible burdens. I've also noticed something else. Many people with hoarding disorder have incredibly active imaginations. They don't just see an object for what it is, they see what it could become, who it could help, what problem it could solve. And that's a beautiful way to see the world. But it also means that every object carries dozens of possible futures. And when every object has a future, letting go can begin to feel like destroying opportunity itself. So, how do we respond? Not by becoming less compassionate, not by becoming less generous, by learning that compassion also includes ourselves. I've often said that recovery isn't about becoming someone different. It's about finding balance. It's about allowing your strengths to remain strengths instead of becoming burdens. Your generosity is a gift. Your empathy is a gift. Your creativity is absolutely a gift. The goal isn't to lose those qualities. The goal is to protect them with healthy boundaries. So as we close today, I'd like to leave you with a question. Is there something in your life that you're holding on to, not because you need it, but because you feel guilty letting it go? Maybe it's an object. Maybe it's an obligation. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a responsibility that was never yours to carry in the first place. This week, don't judge yourself. Just notice it and ask yourself, am I keeping this out of love or out of guilt? Sometimes that one question can begin to change everything. And thank you, as always, for joining me for another episode of Unpacked. And until next time, remember, the healthiest kind of generosity always leaves room for you to thrive, too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Unpacked, the truth about hoarding. For more information or support, visit fighttheblightinc.com. We'll see you next time.